The richest man on the planet is sitting in a podcast chair looking directly into the camera, and when the host asks who he looks up to the most, he says 2 words: the creator. That was Elon Musk in December 2025, speaking on Katie Miller's podcast. The clip spread across the internet almost instantly, but what most people covering it missed is the broader pattern it belongs to. Musk is not an outlier. He is not even the most surprising name on the list. Across the last several years, a quiet and largely unreported phenomenon has been unfolding at the top of American wealth. Some of the most powerful people in technology, entertainment, food production, and retail have been making statements, restructuring businesses, and building organizations around their Christian faith in ways that go well beyond cultural association or vague spirituality. This is a look at 7 of them, ranked from the well-known to the genuinely startling, in ascending order of surprise. Dan Cathy runs Chick-fil-A, and it would be easy to treat him as a predictable first entry. He is well known enough that his faith is almost background noise, but the details deserve more attention than they typically get. Chick-fil-A's official corporate purpose statement does not talk about profit margins or market share. It reads, "We exist to glorify God by being a faithful steward of all that is entrusted to us." That is not language from a church bulletin. It is the operating charter of the highest revenue per unit fast food chain in America. Chick-fil-A closes every single location every Sunday, sacrificing an entire day of sales that every competitor is open and capturing. And it still generates more revenue in 6 days than most chains do in 7. In 2012, when Dan told a reporter he believed in the biblical definition of the family, the backlash was immediate and significant. Boycotts were called. Major cities threatened to block new locations. And sales increased by 12% to $4.6 billion that year. The Cathy family has also signed a written family covenant, a formal promise to remain faithful to Christ's lordship in their lives. No one signs a family covenant for public relations purposes. David Green took it further than any public statement could. Green founded Hobby Lobby in 1970 with a $600 loan from a bank, not a family inheritance or a venture. Capital check, $600. Today, Hobby Lobby generates over $8 billion in annual revenue, employs more than 50,000 people, and operates over 1,000 stores. Green is worth $14 billion, and in October 2022, he gave it all away. He transferred 100% of the voting stock of Hobby Lobby into a trust and wrote an op-ed explaining the decision. His reasoning was not complicated. He said that God was the true owner of his business and that once he understood himself as a steward rather than an owner, the decision to transfer ownership became easy. He used that word, easy, a $14 billion decision, and he called it easy because the theological framework made the outcome obvious. During COVID, when the business was under severe pressure, Green told an interviewer that he had crawled under his desk and prayed, not called his lawyers, not convened the board. He got on his knees under a desk in his office and cried out to God. That is the behavior of someone whose faith is operational, not decorative. Philip Anschutz is the name on this list that most people will not recognize, which is exactly the way Anschutz prefers it. He owns the Los Angeles Kings, the Los Angeles Galaxy, AEG, which is the second largest live entertainment company in the world, the Staples Center in Los Angeles, the Regal Cinemas chain, and the Washington Examiner. Fortune magazine has compared him to J.P. Morgan in terms of his influence over American entertainment infrastructure. He is worth over $11 billion, and he has given approximately 3 formal media interviews since 1979. 3 interviews in more than 4 decades, despite running organizations that hundreds of millions of people interact with every year. He drives himself to work, wears jeans and a Timex watch, and a biographer once described him as abnormally normal. In 2004, in one of those rare public appearances, Anschutz explained why he had financed Walden Media, the production company behind the Chronicles of Narnia films and Amazing Grace. His stated reason, he had decided to stop, cursing the darkness. He used his entertainment infrastructure to put explicitly Christian-themed content into mainstream theaters across America. He also founded the Foundation for a Better Life, responsible for the Pass It on Billboard campaign promoting faith, integrity, and compassion visible on American highways for 2 decades. No press tour. He simply built things and let them run. Pat Gelsinger was the youngest vice president in Intel's history. He later ran VMware, then came back to Intel as CEO, one of the most consequential positions in global technology. Throughout every role, he maintained a practice that would seem unusual in most corporate environments. He asked people if he could pray for them, not in church, not at faith events, but in hallways and meetings and conference rooms in Silicon Valley. By his own account, he prayed with more than 10,000 executives over the course of his career. When running VMware with 13,000 employees, he described that workforce as the church God had given him to minister to. He co-founded a ministry called Transforming, The Bay with Christ, with the explicit stated goal of bringing 1 million people to faith in the San Francisco Bay Area. In December 2024, Intel's board removed him as CEO following a difficult period that included 15,000 layoffs and a significant decline in the company's stock price. His public response was to post Proverbs 4:25 through 26 on social media and call for 24 hours of prayer and fasting, not for himself, but for the employees Intel had just let go. By March 2025, he had taken the role of executive chairman at Glue, a faith-based artificial intelligence platform serving over 140,000 church leaders. Speaking at Colorado Christian University, he drew a direct parallel between Gutenberg's printing press and modern AI, arguing that Christians have an obligation to use the defining technology of their era as a tool for the gospel. This is not a man who turned to faith after a career setback. The faith came first, and the career was built on top of it. He has described the marketplace as a mission field, a place where Christians have both the access and the obligation to serve people who would never set foot in a church. Every company he ran was, in his framing, a congregation. Every meeting was a pastoral opportunity. Peter Thiel is the entry on this list that breaks the most assumptions simultaneously. He co-founded PayPal. He co-founded Palantir, whose name comes from Lord of the Rings, a work written by the devout Catholic J.R.R. Tolkien. He was the first outside investor in Facebook. He is a libertarian who has lived for years in San Francisco. He is openly gay. He is, on the surface, the absolute last person anyone would construct a story about quiet evangelical conviction around. And yet, when asked directly what he means when he says, Christianity is true, Thiel has been consistent. He says he believes in the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ, not as metaphor, not as inspiring narrative. The body, he has said, physically left the tomb. He studied under René Girard, one of the most important Christian philosophers of the 20th century at Stanford, and has said that Christianity functions as the prism through which he understands the entire world. In May 2024, Thiel gave a 55-minute talk on the meaning and significance of Jesus' death and resurrection at the San Francisco home of Y Combinator President Gary Tan, a building that was formerly a church. The audience was approximately 200 Silicon Valley executives. One attendee said afterward that they had not known Thiel was a Christian and had not known Christianity could sound like that. In the fall of 2025, Thiel led a 4-part lecture series on the Antichrist and Christian eschatology at the Commonwealth Club of San Francisco. It sold out. His faith does not fit any of the categories the culture has built for either wealthy technologists or gay men. Girard's influence on Thiel is significant. Girard argued that Christianity uniquely sides with the victim rather than the mob, and that the resurrection permanently disrupted the sacrificial logic human societies had used to manage conflict for millennia. Thiel has applied that framework in investment, politics, and his analysis of Western civilization. His Christianity is not sentimental. It is, by his own description, the most important intellectual framework he has. John Tyson is the chairman of Tyson Foods, a company that processes approximately 1 in every 5 pounds of chicken, beef, and pork consumed in the United States. The company employs 139,000 people across facilities that are, by any description, large-scale industrial operations. What Tyson chose to put inside those facilities is not something most observers of corporate America would have predicted. He installed chaplains, not productivity coaches, not wellness consultants, not employee assistance counselors. Chaplains, providing prayer and pastoral support to workers on the factory floor. The corporate chaplaincy program operates across Tyson facilities, serving tens of thousands of employees, most of them working physically demanding jobs in meat processing plants. The implicit logic is straightforward. Every worker has a soul worth caring for, and the company has a responsibility to make that care available. That is not a diversity initiative. That is a theological conviction about the dignity of labor implemented at Fortune 500 scale, which brings us to Elon Musk. And this one requires some setup because the destination does not land properly without the trajectory. In 2021, the Babylon Bee, a Christian satire publication, interviewed Musk and asked him half in jest whether he too would accept Jesus as his Lord and Savior. His response, "If Jesus is saving people, I will not stand in his way." He was smiling. The tone was light. But something was there. In 2022, he posted on X that Jesus taught love, kindness, and forgiveness, and that he had once thought turning the other cheek was weak and foolish before concluding that he was the fool for not appreciating its profound wisdom. That is not a joke. That is reflection. In July 2024, in an interview with Jordan Peterson that received 18 million views, Musk said he was a big believer in the principles of Christianity and that he thought those principles were very good. In October 2024, speaking with Tucker Carlson, he described himself as culturally Christian, noted he grew up Anglican, and said he had been baptized and attended Sunday school. Then, in December 2025, Katie Miller asked him who he looks up to the most, the Creator. When she followed up by asking about his position on God, he said, God is the Creator. 4 words from the richest person alive, delivered without irony or qualification. And in February 2026, he posted 5 more. I agree with the teachings of Jesus. The post received 4 million views. The trajectory across 5 years runs from a joking acceptance in a comedy interview to a sober public affirmation of Jesus' teachings in a single standalone post. Whether that constitutes saving faith in any theological sense is not something any observer can determine, and it is not something worth speculating about. What is observable is the progression of language, the escalating seriousness of the statements, and the fact that a person with more cultural influence than almost anyone alive is repeatedly, publicly, and with increasing specificity, associating himself with Christian belief in the person of Jesus Christ. What is the pattern across all 7 of these people? None of them are using faith as a brand strategy in the conventional sense. Brand strategies are designed to expand market reach, and public Christian faith narrows it in many of the circles where these individuals operate. Dan Cathy lost business relationships and faced municipal opposition after his 2012 comments. David Green's Hobby Lobby has been the subject of sustained boycott campaigns. Peter Thiel operates in an environment where his statements about the bodily resurrection are, by his own assessment, deeply countercultural. Pat Gelsinger prayed with executives in Silicon Valley, the region of the country where institutionalized religion has the lowest public profile. None of these are positioning moves. They are either genuine convictions, or they are the most expensive and strategically counterproductive branding choices in the history of American commerce. The story the culture tells about wealth and faith runs in one direction. Success produces self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency makes dependence on God feel unnecessary. The penthouse becomes a substitute for the pew. That story has a certain internal logic, and it is not entirely wrong as a description of one common trajectory. But these 7 people represent a different trajectory, and they represent it at a scale and in a cultural context that makes it impossible to dismiss as regional religious habit or inherited tradition. David Green gave away $14 billion because he concluded he had never actually owned it. Philip Anschutz has built one of the most powerful entertainment empires in America, from near total obscurity, because he does not believe his success belongs to him. Pat Gelsinger walked out of one of the most coveted executive positions in global technology into a faith-based AI startup, because he concluded that was the assignment. Peter Thiel is lecturing on Christian eschatology in San Francisco. And Elon Musk, in February 2026, with 4 million people watching, said he agrees with the teachings of Jesus. Whether you share their faith or not, something is happening here that the standard narrative about wealth and belief does not account for. Something is shifting at the top. And the shift is not uniform or easily categorized. Dan Cathy represents a long tradition of Bible Belt business faith that predates the current cultural moment. David Green represents the radical conclusion of that faith, taken to its logical endpoint, actual divestiture. Philip Anschutz represents faith expressed almost entirely through infrastructure and funding rather than public statement. Pat Gelsinger represents the integration of pastoral calling and executive function in a way that does not separate Sunday from Monday. Peter Thiel represents something harder to categorize, a faith that engages seriously with the most difficult intellectual questions Christianity raises and applies those answers to culture, technology, and politics without apology. John Tyson represents faith expressed as structural commitment to the dignity of the people most invisible in corporate America. And Elon Musk represents a public journey, still in progress, unfinished, cautious, and watched by more people than any of the others. 7 different expressions. One common thread. The wealthiest people in America are not all running from the question of God. Some of them are running toward it.